A to Z Mysteries, Book Number 15, The Orange Outlaw, by Ron Roy. Chapter 3. Dink looked past his uncle into the study. The painting was gone. "I've got to call the police," Uncle Warden said. He hurried toward the kitchen, leaving the kids standing in the hallway. "Who could have taken it?" Ruth Rose asked. "And how?" wondered Josh. "The door was locked." "Kids, come quickly!" Dink's uncle yelled from the other end of the apartment. They ran back down the hallway and into the kitchen. "Look at that!" Uncle Warden said, pointing at the kitchen table. The tabletop was littered with orange juice and peels. The fruit bowl was overturned. More peels and dribbles of juice covered the floor. "Yuck, it's all sticky," Josh said, backing away from a small puddle. "This is terrible," Uncle Warden said as he called the police. "Guys, look!" Ruth Rose was pointing to an orange peel near the balcony. The kids walked over and Ruth Rose opened the balcony door. "There's juice on the door handle, too," she said, wiping her hand on her jeans. They found more orange peels on the balcony. "Guy must have been hungry," Josh observed. Dink looked down over the balcony railing. "Could this be how the thief got into the apartment?" he asked. "How?" Josh asked. "On a hang glider? Dink, we're 10 stories up, remember?" Uncle Warden joined them. "A detective will be here soon," he said. Then he noticed the orange peels all over the balcony. Goodness! The kids started to pick up the orange peels. "Leave them," Uncle Warden said. "The police said not to touch anything." They walked into the living room and sat down to wait. "Forrest will be devastated," Uncle Warden said. "Thank goodness he had the painting insured. At least he'll get his money back." Suddenly, Roger's voice came over the small speaker next to the door. "Mr. Duncan, there's a detective here to see you. Shall I send him up?" Uncle Warden jumped up and ran to the door. Pressing the talk button on the speaker, he said, "Thank you, Roger." Then he opened the door and walked into the hall. The kids sat on the sofa, staring at the front door. After a few moments, they heard the elevator door open. Dink's uncle said, "Yes, this is the place. I'm Warden Duncan." Uncle Warden walked back in, followed by a tall man wearing a dark suit and tie. "Kids, this is Detective Frank Costello," Dink's uncle said. The man nodded at the kids, then looked around the room. He had black eyes, dark swept-back hair, and a nose that looked as if it had been broken. "Where was the painting?" Detective Costello asked. "Back here," Uncle Warden said, leading him down the hall toward the study. "Let's go talk to Roger," Ruth Rose said. "Why?" asked Josh. "Maybe he saw someone sneaking around," she answered. "Good idea," Dink said. He grabbed a pad and scribbled a note to his uncle. "Okay, let's go." He and Josh followed Ruth Rose to the elevator. In the lobby, they found Roger at his desk near the front door. Through the glass, Dink could see that the block party was winding down. "Going out again?" Roger asked the kids. Dink shook his head. "Someone stole a valuable painting from my uncle's apartment," he said. Roger jumped from his seat. "A theft in our building? I can't believe it." "It happened while we were at the block party," Josh said. "The creep ate all the oranges, too." "We were wondering if you noticed anyone strange," Ruth Rose put in. Roger shook his head. "I was here the entire time and saw only people who live here," he said. "Absolutely no one else." Roger closed his eyes, then opened them slowly. "I just remembered. Mrs. Cornelius on the 9th floor called out about an hour ago. She thought she saw someone on her balcony. I offered to go up and check, but she said not to bother. Is her balcony below Dink's uncle's? Ruth Rose asked. All the balconies on the rear of the building are directly above or below each other. Ruth Rose looked at Dink and Josh. Then maybe she saw the thief. Chapter 4. Dink explained about the orange peels they'd found on his uncle's balcony. Roger shook his head. But how would a thief climb the building? He asked. Why don't we go outside and take a look? Josh suggested. Maybe we'll find a clue. Kids, it's pretty late, Roger said. Perhaps you should wait till tomorrow. We'll only stay a minute, Dink said. Well, okay. Roger directed them to a metal door around the corner from the elevator. Dink slid back a long bolt and shoved the door open. They walked out into a narrow, well-lit space behind the building. It was completely enclosed except for an alley that led to the street. Next to the building, a dumpster sat in the shadows. I wonder, Ruth Rose said, staring at the dumpster. What if the thief climbed on top of that? Could he reach the first balcony? Dink stared up. The first 2 floors don't have balconies, he observed. Even standing on the dumpster, I don't see how the crook could have gotten up or down this way. Then he had to go through the front door, Josh said. But if Roger didn't see him... Just then an angry voice came out of the darkness. What are you doing back here? This is private property. Who's there? Dink asked. A figure walked out of the shadows. It was Miss Booker. She didn't look happy to see them. It's just us, Dink said. My uncle is Mr. Duncan. We met you at the block party earlier tonight. The woman stopped a few feet from the kids. Her hands were jammed into her coat pockets. She wore a cap pulled down over her orange hair. Why are you kids out here? She asked. There was a robbery in my uncle's apartment, Dink said. Miss Booker nodded. I know. Roger just told me. We thought the crook might have come this way, Ruth Rose said. Yeah, Josh said. Except he'd have to have wings. Miss Booker looked up the side of the building. She touched the bricks with a long finger. A few years ago, I could have climbed this, no problem, she said. The kids stared at the woman. Miss Booker smiled. When I was your age, my father and mother owned a carnival. My brothers did the high wire act. They were known as the Flying Bookers. I was the girl on the trapeze. Did you happen to see anyone in the alley? Dink asked. Miss Booker shook her head. The alley was blocked off, she said. Blocked off? How? Ruth Rose asked. I'll show you. The kids followed Miss Booker down the alley toward the front of the building. Right here, Miss Booker said, stopping where the alley met the street. There was a trailer parked here during the block party. A trailer? Dink asked, trying to remember. Just then, Roger opened the front door and leaned out. Donald, your uncle wants you and your friends to come upstairs, he said. Okay, we'll be right in, Dink said. Good night, Miss Booker. Maybe we'll see you tomorrow. Maybe you will, the woman said. Then she turned and walked back down the dark alley.